John and Mary, thank you very much for joining us today. We're super excited to be with you and also wanted to extend a congratulations on selling your business, as this is quite an accomplishment and you should be very proud of yourself. And also, welcome back. As I understand, you had a great vacation and you enjoyed yourself, so happy that you made it back safely. So I think it's important to start off with just a general understanding of the family, as that is the most important part of the plan, as we have several family members and several goals that we want to plan for. So just starting at the top here, John, we have your age listed as 71. Is that correct? Perfect. And Mary, we have your age listed here at 68. Awesome, thank you. We also have two children. We have Robert, who is 40, and your other child, Eileen, who is 39. And we do have some grandchildren as well. Robert has two children, Kevin and James, who are both rather young, 19 and 10 respectively, and Jill, who is 11. Awesome. Thank you very much for confirming that. As I mentioned, it's important that we have a better understanding of the family, as that will help shape our plan and help us give us direction as we move forward throughout our relationship, and also give us a better idea on timing for a lot of the planning techniques that we'll be talking about and revisiting as our relationship goes on. So, with that, just wanted to dive in a little bit to the scope of our engagement today, which includes a preparation of a holistic financial plan. So, really, we're looking at everything on your balance sheet, and not just the financial side of things, also the kind of emotional and personal side of things, as a lot of them are intertwined. So, we're going to incorporate current financial data. We're going to use projections as well as different types of analysis to determine your overall risk. And we've tailored some strategies to support your near term goals as well as your long term legacy planning goals. So, the idea behind this is to address your financial health, any type of risk management, stresses that might be out there, your overall investment strategy, your actual readiness to retire, the tax calculation. So, how does the tax make its way into your financial picture? And then the estate planning side of your financial plan. So, the purpose that we'll really dive into here is outlined in 5 key steps. So, as we understand, it's important for you and your family to preserve as well as enhance wealth, so that way it's there for future generations, as well as protect against any type of unforeseen risk. So, could be health related or financial related risks. So, we'll talk through that as well. And we'll dive into optimization for your investment allocation or your investment strategy, consistent with your overall risk tolerance, as allocation is incredibly important that we get right, as it's one of those ones that we certainly can control, especially in the beginning. We're going to look into how we can reduce tax liabilities where feasible, where it makes sense to do so. And then we're going to ensure that we're aligned with your estate planning attorney so that we have the right legal and estate structures in place. I want to make sure it's a collaborative effort with not only us here at the firm, but also with some of your other advisors, especially on the legal side. And then we'll end with an overall action plan of some of the things that we have highlighted that are the most important and that we should address sooner rather than later. As I mentioned, the family is an incredible and important part of this plan. Your assets are obviously an important part of this plan, but equally as important are your goals, as those assets will help us accomplish some of those goals based off the size and the timing of those goals. So, based off some of the information you've provided us, we have here your primary goals identified and ranked as follows. So, first and foremost, we want to minimize estate and gift tax exposure while also ensuring all estate planning documents are updated and legally enforceable. Second, we want to review your existing insurance contracts and evaluate the feasibility implications of long-term care insurance. This is something we're seeing quite often now with our clients. It's becoming more and more expensive and important that we plan ahead of time. Number three, we want to reduce any type of annual personal income tax liabilities through efficient structuring and planning. And lastly, our fourth goal, we want to implement an investment strategy that balances your overall willingness to take risk with a disciplined and diversified approach tailored to your financial goals. So, as we understand your risk tolerance, that you've expressed a very strong desire to accept investment risk in that overall pursuit of higher returns. So, investing in equities, both through mutual funds and even direct stock ownership, is part of the plan. Um, but I did notice that you did have an ethical restraint on the portfolio, and we specifically want to exclude tobacco-related holdings because of family health history. So that makes perfect sense. We see that quite often with our clients, um, and so we can absolutely incorporate that into the plan. Um, so as I mentioned, the overall objective here is to align your portfolio with your overall capacity and willingness to bear risk, but we also want to ensure that the investment strategy supports your long-term growth as well as intergenerational wealth transfer. So Robert and Eileen and even Kevin, James, and Jill are taken care of in the future. Some of the assumptions that we use, this is also extremely important because this will help influence the way our numbers work. And of course, the inputs that we put into our models, into our system, are constantly changing. We're looking at the market, we're looking at different environments that will overall influence your plans. So, again, this is essentially just a point in time. These can be updated later on, but these are the numbers that we're using so that way you understand how we got to the calculations in your overall plan. So your marginal tax bracket, 37% is what we're using, a long-term inflation rate of 2.75, and then a risk-free rate of 3.0. Market risk premium we're using is 8%, and your required rate of return during those retirement years is going to be 8%. So it's a number I do believe that we can get behind, and a number that over time has shown itself time and time again. Again, these are assumptions that we're using to perform our retirement analysis. We're using to construct portfolios, and then also just other pieces of the equation that we use to actually come up with our numbers and our overall advice. So we'll start off with your overall financial health. Your current net worth is a strong 13.7 million with annual net disposable income of 226,000, which reflects significant financial strength. In fact, your current ratio of 29.46, which is calculated by taking your current assets over your current liabilities, underscores excellent liquidity, which is in fact well above the benchmark. Your housing ratios are conservative with monthly costs significantly below standard thresholds, which also suggests that obligations that you have are very easily manageable. Um, all in all, our analysis of your financial health is that your liquidity is robust. You have cash readily available with equivalents totaling over 740,000 and projected outflows. So what are you spending of only $575,912? So even in the absence of other income sources, your income that we have today, just the cash and cash equivalents, is significantly higher than the outflows that we have of 575,000. Your real estate assets include a primary residence valued at over 900,000 and a vacation home of 750,000, with a very modest mortgage obligation on the vacation home. Doing this analysis, we've come up with some recommendations for you, one of which we recommend allocating 50% of your maturing CD balances to high yield savings or even money market mutual funds. The idea here is we would like to maintain that liquidity preference that you have stated, but also optimize returns. There's an opportunity there for potentially higher yields, albeit not taking as much risk. So in doing so, we would be able to maintain an adequate emergency reserve to safeguard potential income disruption. Um, any questions there? I know we've covered a lot so far. I just want to make sure that you're following along and this so far seems okay and you're comfortable with this plan. Perfect. All that to say, when it comes time to implement this idea or this strategy, it would really come down to us evaluating different competitive money market funds and high yield deposit accounts, which we do offer here at the firm. But if it's advantageous to go elsewhere in search of that higher yield, we, being a fiduciary, would want to make sure we're pointing you in the right direction. So, again, to summarize, their implementing would come down to evaluating some competitive money market funds here at the firm, or even high yield savings accounts, or maybe looking elsewhere to uh, to maximize that overall return. So diving into the risk side of things, so as we start to go down the plan, we want to also make sure we're talking through the overall risk management profile of your family. And so what we did here is we prepared um, different insurance related or risk management related analysis to really drill into your homeowners, your auto, your disability, and even your health coverage, and make sure that life insurance needs are adequate to cover each spouse. So for you, Mary, as well as for you, John. So in doing this analysis, we started off by identifying your homeowner's coverage, and what we noticed is that your primary residence requires coverage of at least 80%. And right now, the fair market value of your home is 900,000. So if we take 900,000, excuse me, 80% of 900,000, that gives us 720,000 to be adequately protected. Your current coverage in your policy is only 400,000. So this is signaling to us that you are very underinsured in the event of a disaster. This is something that we wanted to make sure we brought to you as soon as possible. Your vacation home, very similar story. It's valued at 750,000, and that 80% requirement would be a coverage of 600,000. Your current coverage is well below that number of 460,000. So these are two pieces that we wanted to make sure you were aware of, and outline next steps to make sure that we're taking care of this sooner rather than later. The other piece of this risk management analysis we wanted to call out was, given your net worth of over 13 million, your current liability coverage is insufficient. So we would recommend that an umbrella liability insurance coverage is in the range of 10 to 15 million. Again, strongly recommended to provide comprehensive asset protection. So in the event something were to happen, you were to be sued via some accident, we would want to make sure that you are protected and that you have the appropriate umbrella policy to pay out in the event of a claim. And then lastly, as we touch on the long-term care side of the insurance equation, um, Mr. Kessler, you are 71 years old, so you are a little bit older. So the likelihood of qualifying for a reasonably priced long-term care coverage is, unfortunately, it is diminished. Excuse me. In other words, it's a little bit harder to obtain coverage, and if you are to obtain coverage, it should be more expensive. So what we would recommend, something to consider, is to establish a family-based care plan, and even setting aside designated funds in a separate account to address any potential long-term care expenses. And we see this quite often with clients. They can't actually obtain long-term care just for a variety of reasons, and so having this separate account, which can also be invested, makes a lot of sense, and it essentially serves the same purpose. So just all in all, to summarize, there are some of our recommendations on those three key items. We want to make sure we update the homeowner's insurance coverage as well as the vacation home insurance coverage, so that way they're aligned with replacement cost value thresholds. Next, we would want to make sure we just obtain an umbrella liability coverage commensurate with your overall net worth. And then lastly, formalize a long-term care strategy in consultation with the entire family, um, and other advisors that you might have. This is a working plan that we can develop together, when we could even do that for you here. Any questions there on the risk management side of things? Okay, awesome, thank you. And so moving along here, the investment side of your wealth plan, the investment planning piece, I just wanted to call out, we did prepare an investment policy statement. as well as an overall portfolio allocation and analysis. So, simply put, your policy statement tells us what are the parameters of your investments. What are some of those items, like for example, the tobacco that you want excluded? What are some biases you may have, maybe a tilt or overweight in a particular sector that you want to focus on? It's kind of like our Bible for investing for the family. It's our rule book, for example. So, diving into some of the analysis, though your portfolio did outperform market benchmarks, we did notice it's heavily concentrated in four individual stocks with a total cost basis of 960,000. Um, this creates a heightened level of exposure. We call that single company risk or single stock exposure. The idea there is if, in this case, those four companies were to go down, well, unfortunately, that would mean your portfolio, your retirement would also be heavily impacted. It would be extremely volatile because you're only banking on four companies rather than a basket of, say, 50 or 100 portfolio companies. Um, Additionally, we also noticed Mary's 403B account is underutilized in terms of a growth potential. We feel as though there's opportunity there to go after that equity risk premium. Equities tend to be a little bit more volatile. However, they're a long play and they tend to produce higher returns as opposed to some of the more stable or fixed income investments. So, as we dive into some of the recommendations, we would want to implement what we call a tax loss harvesting strategy, which would allow us to realize 20,000 in capital losses, of which 3,000 may be recognized in the current year, with the remainder going forward or carrying forward. Those proceeds from this strategy would be redeployed into a broad-based, low-cost index fund such as the S&P 500, an ETF, or even a mutual fund they have too. So, as I mentioned earlier, rather than having four stocks, if we were to invest in a low-cost index fund, we would have a basket of stocks. In other words, we'd have the entire S&P 500 index. So perhaps those four stocks are actually included in the index, even if they were to be down, the remaining 496 stocks in the index fund would be balancing things out. So you wouldn't be hit as hard. We would reallocate Mary's 403B account to growth equities, again, to maximize that long term appreciation. Of course, equities would be a little bit more of a rocky ride, but the idea here is the long term. We want to give the assets time to grow and weather the storm to outpace inflation and produce some attractive returns. We do this through what we call the glide path approach towards income generating assets as retirement progresses. So, in other words, depending on your age and where you are in life, that glide path would go into effect. So, a little bit more risky while you have time. As you have less time, it starts to go down the path and kind of de-risk or change the allocation to be more appropriate based on where you are in life. And then we would develop a comprehensive asset allocation strategy, which would reflect that moderately high risk tolerance you've expressed to us, which would ensure diversification across asset classes and even across geographies. So we'd have a broad base positioning across your global portfolio, your combined portfolios. Diving into the retirement side of things now, so looking into some of the retirement planning, we have some analysis and recommendations that we would like to share with you. So, your projections that we created here with our modeling demonstrated adequacy under current assumptions. So, with an inflation adjusted return of 8.17%, this provides a sufficient buffer against longevity and purchasing power risk. So, I think this is an important thing to call out. With modern medicine, the way things are going in this world, people being a little bit more health conscious, that longevity risk is something that we certainly have to consider now as an investors. We are living longer, so instead of 70, 75, people are starting to live well into their 80s and even their 90s. So we just want to make sure that we're keeping up with inflation. We're investing our assets to ensure that they're going to be there in the future, and we're not spending down our assets. We're ensuring that they're growing enough to cover our future needs as we continue to get older and maybe our medical expenses will also increase, we want to make sure we're earning enough to cover that. Um, so some of the recommendations that we wanted to include for you today. So we would recommend allocating $16,000 annually to a non-deductible traditional IRA, followed by a Roth conversion to create that growing pool of tax-free assets, not only for you but also for your heirs. So for the future, as I know you had mentioned, that's incredibly important to you. That make sure Robert, Eileen, Kevin, James, and Jill are taken care of well on when you're no longer here with us. Some of those other recommendations would be investing a portion of the installment note proceeds from the business sale into a balanced 60/40 portfolio of equities and fixed income securities to generate income, but also take advantage and maintain long term growth. So, those note proceeds will be a significant part of this retirement plan that we're building out for you. The any questions there on the retirement side of the equation? Okay, perfect. So jumping into the income tax planning side of this, so we do have some worksheets and calculations that we prepared for you as well, but we think it's important to just highlight some of the analysis and recommendations here that we were able to come for you. So some opportunities to enhance tax efficiency include the following. We would um, move forward with those annual Roth conversions using contributions of 16,000 to a non-deductible traditional IRA and then converting to Roth IRA. So I had mentioned that into the retirement side of things, but you see how they all come together as a Roth conversion is a taxable event, and so we want to make sure that we're working in collaboration with your CPA to make sure we're doing it at the right time. Um, and if we do this right, of course, that future tax-free growth will be a big part of this. And also, selling concentrated stock positions to realize capital losses. So going to specific tax lots to realize those losses. So being very strategic, we have that ability to pinpoint the exact loss we want to realize and reallocating into some more diversified funds. Um, Another thing we want to also talk through is just the idea of postponing the sale of the 1918 Jenny stamp until your taxable income is lower. So the idea here is that we'd be potentially structuring the transaction as an installment sale to smooth tax liability. So we don't want to kind of put the tax in overdrive. We want to make sure we're timing this right so it's not happening all at once and you're realizing a significant tax bill. We can do this over time. And then lastly, utilizing QCDs or qualified charitable distributions from your retirement accounts to maximize your overall philanthropic impact, but also um, reduce your adjusted gross income. So highlighting that goal of yours to be a little bit more tax efficient. Arguably, the most important part of all of this, I would say, is your estate planning or your estate plan. This is something that often gets overlooked but has a significant impact and can potentially have consequences if it's not done from the beginning and constantly reviewed over time. Because let's face it, your life is going to change, and so should your estate plan, your wishes, or the documents that you've worked with an attorney should reflect your wishes. Perhaps something happens in the family, you want to make sure that's accurately captured in your plan, so that way when you're no longer here, you can rest easy knowing that there's a governing document that is taking care of your wife, or Mary, in your case, your husband John, but the children and even the grandchildren. So some analysis and recommendations that we want to walk through with you. When we are looking at the data, neither of you are actually subject to federal estate tax. So that's a good thing. However, both of your estates face some potential probate exposure due to the way your assets are titled and lack of beneficiary designation. So those key deficiencies that I want to highlight include lack of durable powers of attorneys and healthcare proxies. So perhaps you're alive and you're incapacitated. Who would you want to make the final call for you, or keep you living? Those are important items that need to be addressed, and you want to make sure you're making sure you have your power of attorney completed, so that way your wishes are indeed honored. And this is one of those items that people often overlook. John, your 401k, I did notice you listed Salvation Army as the beneficiary. Um, that's great, but we just want to make sure that truly is, um, where you want the assets going to. So if you could confirm, that would be awesome. Okay, perfect. That's a great organization, and so I just wanted to make sure that that was indeed still the case and nothing's changed. Perfect. And then Mary, your 403b, we see that you have your state listed as the beneficiary. Um, I just wanted to walk through that because we could potentially be exposing your 403b to probate. And so this can simply be avoided by making sure a beneficiary and even a contingent beneficiary is listed, because the probate process can take quite a long time. It could even be quite expensive. So, we do see this often. We have clients who start at a new firm, or they start, in your case, as a teacher, and they just overlook it. They forget to mark their beneficiary, not just in retirement accounts, but other accounts. And so they just forget, and time goes on, and it's they think it's harmless, but it's quite important. So we just want to make sure we're having your beneficiary listed. And then also the CDs and even the mutual fund accounts, we didn't see a POD or TOD titling listed. We just saw that they were listed under John's name. So um, these would pass on to probate. If that's not the desire and wishes, we just want to make sure that you are indeed designated Mary or even the children as a beneficiary. And I suspect that's your intent, that you'd want it to go to them. Perfect. Thanks for confirming. And then lastly here, the vacation home. Uh, we did notice it was titled under John's name. Another recommendation there would just be to have it titled jointly, so kind of following that same exact titling flow as the house. The primary home is held jointly, so if one of you were to die, it would go directly to the other individual um, without probate intervening. So one of those recommendations would be to just make sure we update the vacation home to be also in line with the primary home as joint ownership. And then how do we even accomplish this? Well, we provided recommendations, but we work very closely with estate planning attorneys, so we're happy to connect you with one that we feel confident in, because although we are providing this advice, they would be the actual ones to implement or even draft documents. So again, they would be the ones to draft a will, power of attorney, or healthcare surrogate or proxy, um, and even retitle assets accordingly. Certain assets they definitely would help with, but as far as putting them on your account here at the firm, we would be able to do that. We could code it properly. Um, so uh, that process, simply put, would involve an attorney, and that attorney would charge fees, and there would be some administrative costs. So they are significant, or they can be significant, but we feel as though the benefit of reducing probate exposure and ensuring orderly transfer outweighs that cost. So something we always recommend to our clients. I know I've gone over a lot of information here, but I think summarizing everything we've talked about in 5 action items or action plan steps is a great way to end this meeting. So the top 5 here that we recommend you do immediately: 1, reallocate 50% of your CD balances upon maturity to high yield savings accounts or even money market funds for that liquidity preference and that pursuit of higher yield, hopefully to keep up with inflation. 2, we'd want to update the homeowners insurance and vacation home insurance to 720 and 600,000 respectively to ensure adequate coverage. Third, we would want to secure an umbrella liability insurance in the range of 10 to 15 million. Just again, because of your significant net worth, we want to make sure you're protected and nothing bad happens. Number 4, we would want to establish a long-term plan, again in collaboration with your family. That way, they're on board, they understand the plan, and we have designated funding to take care of unexpected healthcare expenses. Just want to emphasize that again, when things aren't going right, when family members are sick or unhealthy, it can be extremely stressful. So if we have this plan in place, the family's on board, we know where the funds are, we know how much funds are, it just makes these things a lot simpler. And then lastly, we would want to engage an estate planning attorney to implement essential documents and update titling as well as beneficiary designations. We feel as though if we combine all these elements, these measures will protect your existing wealth that you've worked so hard to achieve. They would enhance future growth, and we would be able to align your financial position with your long term objectives. So I thank you very much for standing with me here and listening to all this advice that we provided. I hope this has been helpful. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to give me a call or an email. I'm happy to help you. Thank you so much, Mr. and Mrs. Kessler.